Here's to you, team at AMD that had to come up with the pricing for the RX 590. You no doubt labored over that intensely, but you came up with a winning product. I was really surprised. It's a Polaris re-release, which would cause some people to but it's a 590. It's the RX 590. It's presumably better than a 580, but we need to dive in and take a look. There are some that have been critical to AMD on the RX 590 refresh, but you know, there are a lot of people out there that are building gaming rigs for the first time this holiday season. And there are a lot of people out there that are upgrading their existing rigs, such as this Ivy Bridge Dell 7010. Now, not every Dell that you get is even gonna have a power supply that can handle video card upgrades, but I've got this for illustration purposes because, check it out, we've got the PNY Accelerate. Look at this, dual 6-pin power adapter, just 660 Ti with 2 gigs of memory. Just, oh, there's a lot of you out there rocking this kind of a card. Turns out this is gonna be a really good upgrade for you for that. What they're doing, what AMD is targeting with the RX 590 is a little bit better performance, but it's not like a pre-overclocked 580. They haven't taken a 580 and just overclocked it, but it is Polaris. The process for manufacturing the silicon has improved slightly. And so that means that rather than being pre-overclocked, it's just a slightly improved process. So it'll use slightly less power and clock a little bit higher. But that translates into better performance, especially around 1080p and 1440p. Now 1080p, a good 1080p gaming experience is what AMD really designed the RX 580 to address. And the RX 590 will deliver a great 1080p gaming experience for modern games, including modern games, even at very high presets, because I tested a few games, tested actually more than a few, but you know, it'll deliver a really good gaming experience at 1080p, but to my surprise, it actually delivers a really good gaming experience at 1440p as well, like over 60 FPS for most titles, even in the high to very high presets. Now, if you go medium or medium high, where some settings are high and some settings are medium, you can even do 3440 by 1440 with the RX 590, which is not something I recommended for the RX 580. Again, it depends on the game and a little bit about what you want to do and some other stuff like that, but let's talk about the features first. First off, this card has one 6-pin power connector and one 8-pin power connector, which if you're upgrading an OEM system like this one, is going to be a little more limiting because typically the power supplies in these are sort of right size. In fact, if you didn't get a graphics card from the factory, this system's only going to have a 275 watt power supply. And the power supplies are typically not exactly standard. But if you happen to get one that did have a graphics card, I'm not even sure if it was this one, it might have been a Quadro, and this is an upgrade to the upgrade. But if you did have something like that, then this system still makes a perfectly fine and capable gaming system. It's Ivy Bridge. I mean, that's Z77, that's, you know, we're talking 3-4 generations back on Intel, depending on how many of the lake generations you count as actually being different generations or not. But if you're building a new system, you know, if you're using like Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 3, I mean, let's face it, the Ryzen 5 2600 really honestly is the best value this holiday season for a super kick-ass machine that is really great at gaming, but you can also do a lot of other stuff with. And the 590, especially at 1080p and higher gaming, goes really well with that. And so Sapphire has put together the Nitro Plus RX 590, which is a good cooler. It's a good aftermarket cooler, and it's based around the RX 590. It's literally exactly the same as the RX 580. Same number of, you know, compute cores and all this other kind of stuff, just clocked higher. It's about 1500 megahertz, although with the overclock, I was able to get it up to 1650 with a slight undervolt. Yeah, I don't know, AMD's utilities and drivers have really improved dramatically, and so you can fiddle with it and you can do some overvolting and some undervolting and stuff like that. And so I can run with a pretty decent undervolt at stock speeds when it's quieter, or I can get about 1650 out of it. And if I want more than 1650, I have to sort of give it more voltage, and I don't want to give it more voltage, but I can actually give it a little bit less voltage up to 1650, because you can set all that in the Wattman power profile thingy, and it runs great. It runs shockingly well. And so, you know, you got to compare. It's comparison shopping, right? You got to compare. Oh my God, what is he doing? Now he's gone off script. Okay, this is the Evga Geforce Gtx 1060. This is not a bad card. It's a 1060. This card is slower than this one, and I think the RX 590 is a better value than the 6 gig GTX 1060 in general. I'm not picking on EVGA. I'm not saying it's a bad card or anything like that. I just think that, you know, people are doing the comparison shopping. This card is retailing for around $300, like $290 to $310, something like that. And it's really, I mean, I really feel like AMD has like labored and obsessed over that price point, because if you think about the RX 580 before the mining insanity, you know, that was around a $200 card, like $200 to $250, 8 gig card. It's really good value for what it is, but need something with just a little bit more horsepower before you spend, you know, $400 on, you know, like Vega 56 or a higher end card like a 1070 or something like that from Nvidia or some, you know, some other class of card. But the reality is most people have a 1080p monitor, and more people have a 1440p monitor, but according to the Steam hardware survey, not a lot of people have a 4K display. And so this is the perfect card for that setup, because you don't need to spend $1,200 on a graphics card to have a good gaming experience. This card will deliver that gaming experience in spades. It's really, honestly, a really awesome card. I was surprised at how good it was playing around with it and doing the testing and just messing around with all of the different stuff with this. Now, they do recommend a 500 watt power supply, which makes sense with the 6-pin plus 8-pin power connector that it needs, because it will draw quite a bit more power. And that's really the one advantage that you have with the 1060, because typically 1060s have like a 6-pin or an 8-pin power connector, just a single connector, and that is what supplies power for the system, so it uses a little bit less power. And the 1060 is a little bit quieter, but honestly, this is not a loud card, even with the, you know, even with the overclock, even with the fans cranked a little bit. Now, of course, you also have other advantages. So like the monitors that we tested with this are the Pixio monitors that do FreeSync. And so it's got 2 DisplayPort, 2 HDMI, and 1 DVI. And with our Pixio setup through DisplayPort, we were able to get the full FreeSync range. FreeSync is a great gaming experience. You don't get that anywhere else yet. It's coming for Intel iGPUs soon, but you can't really game with an iGPU. What are you doing? That's crazy. That's crazy talk. You can't do that. One other really cool feature of this card is that it has dual BIOS. So by default, it's got a compute optimized BIOS as well as a gaming optimized BIOS. Now, compute optimized BIOS is code for mining, which has sort of fallen out of favor with Bitcoin going below 4,000 into like the 3,000 range. But there's a compute optimized BIOS and a gaming BIOS. But if you're the kind of crazy person who wants to fiddle with modding your BIOS, well, you can switch over to that compute BIOS and mod to your heart's content, and it will totally be okay. Now, this is Polaris. It should be totally plug and play on Linux, and I'm regret to inform you that it's not plug and play on Linux. There is some kind of change to the firmware or the BIOS, the UEFI or something on these cards that make it incompatible with the AMD GPU driver on Linux. And I'm looking into it, I'm working on it, but I don't have a fix for it yet. It should be pretty straightforward though, because honestly, this is not a lot different from, you know, speaking in terms of like Polaris. So it's some kind of like system management bug or like internal management bus bug. I think it's gonna get resolved pretty quickly, but I have no idea what the root issue is. But as of right now, the 590 does not work on Linux. So if you're looking for a great graphics card for Linux, go with the 580 because it's tried and true. It works really well. And it's really surprising. Like that's actually one of the better things about, like if you just take the graphics card and shrink it and you're not doing anything super new in silicon, you would expect it to work basically flawlessly on Linux. That's what I expected. That was not my experience. If you're interested in that kind of thing, we have a separate channel for Linux videos. You should go check that out. I'm working on more videos for that. Been kind of busy lately. That's a whole other thing. This is a video card review. So let's talk about it. Okay, Time Spy at 1440p, that was about 33 FPS, which is honestly very impressive for 1440p, with a score of, a graphics score of 5360. Now you can compare that with 30 FPS on our EVGA 1060 OC, and that's a score of about 4740. So that's a pretty big difference for Time Spy. Tomb Raider, we've got the very high preset with FXAA. That was about 52.7 FPS with a minimum of 48 FPS. Now you can turn off FXAA and be way over 60 FPS, no problem. But 52.7 FPS. Well, fiddle with the settings a little bit and you can get over 60 FPS at 1440p. Now at 1080p, 78 FPS all day long with minimums of 64 FPS. And honestly, that's probably just the engine or load in or something like that, because I really didn't see that during normal gameplay. This is just canned benchmark stuff. So overall, what's the verdict on the RX 590? Overall, it's a great card. It's actually the best value around the $300 price point, in my opinion, especially when compared to maybe something like the GTX 1060. This is an EVGA GTX 1060 OC, which is the other card that I use for comparison. Honestly, it's really impressive how much AMD has been able to squeeze out of Polaris. This is technically a 3rd generation Polaris card. It's on a different lithography process now, so they've switched to 14 LP to 12 LP, I guess. And it's physically the same chip. They didn't really make any changes to the chip, but they did change something because of the Linux compatibility issue. So when we're talking about RX 580 and RX 590, I mean, if you're a comparison shopper, you should be thinking about RX 580s, and especially RX 580s that have been factory overclocked, because if you look at it on paper, they're within 150, 200 megahertz of the speed of the RX 590, at least the basis speed of the RX 590. But the question is it also overclockable? Because you get into a situation where it's like, well, is the RX 590 just a pre-overclocked RX 580? And I can answer that, and the answer is no, it's not. It's actually, you have just as much overclocking headroom on the RX 590, if not a little bit more. Me personally, I was able to get this card to 1650 megahertz with a slight undervolt all the way up to the point that it hit 1650 megahertz, and that's basically at stock voltage. And I thought that was really good. I thought maybe I had a cherry card, but I actually checked around the internet and most people are hitting over 1600 megahertz core clock, which is honestly very impressive. The power usage, especially when compared to the 1060, is really the Achilles heel of this card. If you want a cooler and quieter card, it's the EVGA GTX 1060, but when you factor in the refresh rate and FreeSync and technologies like Radiant Chill, really it's a wash. I mean, you do have to have the 6-pin plus 4-pin power connector for the RX 590, whereas you only have to have the one for the GTX 1060, which may factor in if you're doing legacy upgrades like that. But if you're building a new machine, I mean, even the 450 watt power supplies these days have 2 connectors generally. So I don't think the power thing is really much of an issue overall. And that makes the RX 590 a better value, the best value in this price bracket. Right now, especially with the game bundle, because with the game bundle you get Devil May Cry 5, The Division 2, and Resident Evil 2. And these are all games that are not supposed to come out until Q1 of 2019. So you buy the card and you sign up on AMD's website, and then presumably they're going to email you the codes or something as soon as those games are released. But like the Division 2 is not even due out until like March of 2019. So overall, I mean, for what it does right now, the performance that it has right now with 1440p gaming and even ultra wide gaming, it's shockingly good. And for modern games that are, let's say, not really like super optimized, if you're going to run 1080p, you can run 1080p at basically maximum settings, even on modern games that are not really super well optimized. Linux was the most surprising thing, and there's going to be separate videos on that on the Linux channel. So subscribe to the Linux channel if you're interested in that kind of thing. But if you just want a plug and play gaming solution, best value per dollar for around $300 US, this is the best deal out there right now, especially for this holiday season. So, give it a look, do some testing, check some other reviews and benchmarks, and see how your game performs with this particular card, because there's going to be a little variation from game to game. I mean, there always is. But overall, my opinion is this is a really solid card. It is very, very impressive that AMD was able to do that with Polaris with a relatively small die shrink. I mean, it really is, almost... if you've got an RX 580, are you going to upgrade? No. Are you going to, throw out Vega and upgrade? No. But if you've got the GTX 660 Ti, now might be the time to upgrade. I'm Wendell. This is Level 1, and you can find me in the Level 1 forum at forum.level1text.com. You should come and hang out and show off pictures of your build with this different color scheme that you might have for your build. I mean, it's a Nitro Plus. It's going to just do the gaming and get out of the way. Do you really need RGB insanity? See ya.